great to see you. And maybe it's worth just running around the room and just saying your name and what town or city you're with. I'm Paul Costello. I live in Montpelier.
Teddy Wazazak, Barre City.
And wait, if you have a role.
City councilor and state representative-elect.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor, Barre City.
Mike Miller, Planning Director for the City of Montpelier.
Go Tess. Tess Taylor, Barre City. I'm the homelessness and housing liaison for the city, but I also work in resilience.
Bill Fraser, Montpelier City Manager. Jack McCullough, Montpelier Mayor.
Chris Pratt, resident of East Montpelier.
Glenn Wyatt, East Montpelier Planning Commission, DRB.
My name is Matthew Thomas. I'm with The Bridge. I'm just listening.
Great to have you here.
Lee.
Stephanie Smith. I live in Montpelier, but I work for the state, so I'm here listening in my state capacity.
Okay.
I'm Ben Block. I work for Tetra Tech as an environmental consultant and water quality specialist, so also here listening.
Great.
Roy Schiff, I live in Montpelier, used to be on the Conservation Commission, and I'm a water resource engineer. I do a lot of work around central Vermont.
Okay, great.
I'm Keith Ritchie. I'm a watershed planner for Vermont DEC. I'm here to listen.
Will Pitkin, planner at the Regional Planning Commission, and I'll be the scribe for this group.
Great.
And Ben Keegan-Feller, I'm the field administrator for the town of Washington.
Awesome. So are you representing Washington?
I am representing.
Oh, great, great. So we're going to just do a sort of lightning round where we ask you, like Montpelier could probably talk for hours about all the different work that's going on in recovery. We don't have time for that. What we have time for is a snapshot from your community, and our scribe's going to be taking copious notes to grasp the gist of what's going on, and especially when you think about floodplain restoration, about water management, about what we can do to make the next flood less than this one, because this is fundamental to where we are today. And why don't we start with Barre City? So, like in 3 paragraphs, what are you guys doing when you think about resilience efforts?
Teddy, why don't you start?
Sure. So the city, we are going through the buyout process. We had around 60 buyout requests for FEMA, so we've been navigating which ones we are able to approve. The city council recently adopted a flood resiliency plan that was authored by myself and Councilor Amanda Gustin, along with input from city staff and city residents and the mayor and the rest of the council and city manager that outlines potential projects over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So that document is now complete and adopted, and it has, it's meant to be a living, breathing document. So as projects get completed, we can check them off and elevate other priorities, or as funding opportunities come up that we haven't been able to, that we don't see coming, that might fit one of the lower level priorities, we can move that up and match that to whatever funding mechanism. We've also engaged with SLR to come up with a list of 50 plus potential flood mitigation projects that could be done in Barre City, and we've narrowed those down. Some have been submitted as part of a grant application for the EPA with the help of Pat Moulton and others. So that's like a super high level.
Terrific.
Yeah, I think most importantly, the city council recently appropriated $160,000 of ARPA funds to study the hydrology, to study how the water moves through the city. So, you know, most importantly, we're looking to the science. We're looking to really understand, you know, for example, our storm system. We actually don't have a complete map of our storm system, and we don't know how well our storm system actually functions. So, you know, we've really made the commitment to look to the science, listen to the river scientists, listen to the hydrologists, and then take that data and use that data to prioritize those mitigation projects. And I know I can speak for Teddy, even though he won't be voting on the budget, unfortunately, because he'll be resigning from the council now that he's been elected state rep. But we will appropriate a significant amount of money towards future flood mitigation projects. And I think that's what the city has to do moving forward.
Terrific. Awesome. Chris,
that was a lot more than 3 paragraphs.
No, but you got a lot going on. Is Chris Violet here?
Yeah.
That's you, Chris?
Yeah.
Chris Violet,
Barre Town. You know, now that we're finally caught up on most of repairing the stuff from 23 and 24, stream mitigation is a big thing, culvert mitigation. That's our big thing. We've just got a lot of streams that need a lot of work, a lot of culvert work that we're hoping to, that would be our goal. And a lot of undersized culverts.
Is there discussion in the town of wetlands restoration or opening lands for resilience
Yeah,
projects?
I mean, definitely some of that. We're going to do some buyouts, hopefully, that will help lead to that. We've got some FEMA mitigation projects that will help with that. So, yeah, there's some of that as well.
Terrific. Okay, East Montpelier is Selena here?
I'm here.
Oh,
Sorry.
hey.
Yes,
You
we're
too.
representing. Yes.
Yeah, but she'll be the mouthpiece. She'll be
Oh,
the
I'm
talker.
not I'm always a talker, but yes, no. And I actually am wearing two hats, so I'm wearing also the Goddard. We were trying to build a deep adaptation and resilient model at Goddard College because it is a tri-town campus. Chris Pratt and I were trying to do that, and we brought what we researched and what we learned to the new Goddard. So anyway, there's two hats, but East Montpelier was blessed. We were not hard hit like Plainfield and our surrounding towns, but we are still trying to plan for these emerging threats for obviously flood, but also fire. So at the planning commission level, we're thinking about, okay, how do we rethink village density? Where, what is the high ground? There's I'm from a tiny town called North Montpelier Village, which is it was flooded in 2023, a kind of collapsed mill town. How do you really rethink? How do you take care of the elders who live there? How do you how do we rethink how we're going to live through all of these threats and together? So there's everything from village like rezoning and trying to rethink density, trying to figure out wastewater. Wastewater is a huge issue for East Montpelier. It's sort of choked some of our village density projects. How do you rethink, like we're saying, wetlands? Just thinking more as a community along the Winooski and where the confluence of the Kingsbury branch and the Winooski meet. How do we rethink and sort of share resources with Plainfield, Marshfield, Calais, and think like a watershed?
Yeah, terrific. Well, thanks so much for being here. Montpelier, I don't know who wants to start, Mike or Bill or Mayor?
I guess I could break it into a couple of pieces. The first one, we obviously created the Commission for Resilience and Recovery, which we've been trying to work with them to kind of deal with the topic we're talking about tonight, which is most of the watershed level and those things. The staff has been, whether it's public works, planning, city manager, we've all been focusing primarily on mitigation and those aspects, the hardening of our downtowns. So we put those into three buckets. We have the residential, unlike Barre City, which had a lot of residential, we didn't have as much. We have about 12 to 15 buildings that had water into the first floor that were residential structures. So we're buying out some of those, we're elevating the others. So we've got, that was our first goal, first plan. Second one was to start working on the public infrastructure. So the fire station, city hall, police station were all flooded in 23. We've got plans for moving forward. That'll be years, but we'll get there on getting those projects done, and those will be hardened. And then the last piece that we're trying to work on is the commercial district, and that's going to take a lot of work. How do we flood-proof 100 buildings in the downtown? This is going to take a lot of money, a lot of coordination, because you might flood-proof your building, but your building's connected to the building next to you, and if that person isn't interested in flood-proofing their building, you're all going to sink or swim together on that one. So we've got to see how can we coordinate, get everybody together, get all these buildings flood-proof to the best that we can. And so those are really the three pieces, but we've been focusing on those mitigation pieces, HMGP. The best example we have is our sewer plant, $80 million, $100 million plant. It's really currently protected by Dog River Road, which acts as a levee, but it's not high enough. So for a couple $100,000, we can elevate that road and have a nice big levee. But it takes Army Corps of Engineers, it takes time, it takes money. But those are the things we're trying to do so that way the next flood, we have less damage. But we're not necessarily right now working on those projects of how do we get more properties bought up and put into conservation. How do we, we know they're working on 5 Home Farm Way to purchase that. There are a number of projects we know are going on, but as city government, we aren't working on those. We're relying on our partners to kind of push those forward.
Okay.
And then we'll get there. We'll get to those other pieces later.
Yeah.
But right now, we have to focus on those important infrastructure pieces.
Yep, yep. Anything you want to add, Bill or Mayor?
I just add, I mean, Mike really summed it up, and his group is the one that's leading most of our staff efforts. The commission's been great. The city appropriated $100,000 to the commission to help them do their bit so that, you know, they've really been focused, and they've hired John, which has been super. I'd just say that our biggest challenge, I think, as we talk about the watershed, is so much of our watershed is already developed and channeled, and, you know, I think Barre probably has some, you know, similar issues. And so, to some extent, you know, we are really dependent on our neighbors to, you know, to find floodplain, and we're trying to find it where we can. But, you know, so the decision, you know, imagine if either of our cities said, okay, everybody's just we're gonna tear everything down, and move everything away from the rivers, right? Yeah, our whole cities would change. And so, you know, Paul, you remember when we were holding our forums, people like, they should just move the whole downtown up here to the college. And I was like, okay, we could do that. But so I think that's really the challenge. Where do we even find the floodplain that in a highly developed city? And so we certainly want to work cooperatively with everybody and do our part, whatever we can. But Mike said, really, a lot of our plan is just like, how do we protect what's there when it floods?
Okay.
Because it's gone.
I'll just add a little bit. We're looking at the river like from one end of the city to the other, from Home Farm Way over on the east side of the city, which we'll wind up owning and having it be floodplain, all the way to looking at how we can raise the money to remove dams in downtown, to Dog River, dealing with the west side of the city. And a big thing that we don't control is that the biggest property owner right along the river downtown is state government. And if you remember that slide we saw up there, a lot of that was underwater is state-owned parking lots. And until the state knows what they're doing with the employees, we don't know what's happening with the land. But having all that paved parking area is not the best thing.
Sounds like an opportunity for conversation.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that even before 2023, we started developing stormwater utility as a way to fund improvements to our stormwater system. And, you know, we've been doing combined sewer overflow fixes for years, but we're not, you know, the stormwater utility to be able to get money from property owners who are contributing to storm runoff is going to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, great.
Just to that last point, I will be brief. We actually, after 2011, we had both Irene and we had those of us that said really bad May storm that year as well. Right. We did a stormwater master plan for the city. Actually, Julie Moore, in her private engineering capacity, was the author for us. And so we've been following that ever since and trying to upgrade and those the changes we made after 2011 all held up and proved themselves in 2023 and 2024. It was the substandard ones that did. So if you're getting recommendations to make the changes, do them.
Yeah, we're at that point. We're going to the next level. All right, thanks so much for sharing that. We've got 3 more towns here. Is Emily here from Orange? Nope. Okay. And then we had Ben from Washington. That's you, Ben?
Yep.
You want to share a little bit what are you guys thinking about resilient strategies with the land in Washington?
We are, so we're a pretty different town than Barre or Montpelier or even East Montpelier. We're just under 1,000 residents. I think we're unique in the state of Vermont that the headwaters of 3 major river systems originate in the town of Washington. So just thinking about the Winooski, the Waits, and the first branch of the White.
So it's your fault.
So it's yeah, so in some sense, everything starts, at least in the southeast part of the Winooski. I know the farm where that water starts in and then finds its way all the way west. Just thinking about the Winooski piece of town, so it's kind of the northwest part of town, we were absolutely slammed in July 2023. We don't have an official rain gauge in town, but Paul Beatty, who lives in the village, the old road foreman, he keeps his own grade gauge. We had about 10.5 inches of water in 24 hours, which would probably put us right up there with Calais. 34 individual sites of damage on just the July 23 FEMA slate that I've continued to work through with that agency. And what's been interesting is what's been interesting for us is just seeing how each damage site is really unique. You know, there's some sites where if you go through the FEMA in-kind repair process, then they open up the hazard mitigation room to you, and if you wait that out, you could do resilience work. And a lot of what we get pitched is, you know, how would you like a culvert that's 2 times that size or 3 times that size? Mm-hmm. Some roads, that's a great solution. Some roads, you know, it's eight root wads of, you know, mature maples that jammed that, and you could have a 40-foot culvert and it wouldn't have done any difference. So impact-wise, in that northwest quadrant, we had a 19th century dam that we were in the process of decommissioning. The flood beat us to that and decommissioned that. We have 3 private ponds, you know, just sort of hovering about 400 feet above the village center. All 3 of those let loose. Our whole downtown village center is essentially in a floodplain. It was a perfect site to move the village center there in the early 1800s because you could harness water power in innumerable different areas. Now that same feature of it makes it pretty awful for water events. So we continue to experience these. The other things on here are what are we working to do and what are we hoping to do. So right now we're still working on road repairs. We've got 2 more bridges. We're in 3 different declared disasters. We did apply to the unique opportunity for a non-town match grant cycle, and we got accepted for 2 different projects. One is to run that engineering study of the village center so we can kind of model future storms based on a highly detailed picture of where vulnerabilities are. And then the other is we got 1 floodplain buyout back of the Baptist church parking lot, which we hope will extend to a broader floodplain area. We have a very thin bridge that connects the rest of town to the school, which also acts as our emergency shelter. And that bridge touches water in all of these events.
Yeah. You kind of jumped into the second question, but so we'll come back to a lot of that. We have more opportunities, but thanks so much for that. It's great to hear what's going on down there. Williamstown, is someone here from Williamstown? We had Rich Turner sign up? No? Well, it's a wintry night out there, and it's great that you're all here. So let's go to the second question, which is, you know, as you look at increasing adaptation and reducing flood impacts, you know, what else is going on in your community? What else should we know about what you're doing? And ultimately, we're going to get into, you know, how do we partner to move those things forward? Are there lines across communities? And this is wide open, so would like to share.
Well, we're trying to develop housing a lot, and we have a plan that we're working on. Some of you know, a couple of years ago, we bought the old Elks golf course, and it's at the very east end of town, and it is 130-some acres, and we're looking to do 300, 400, 500 units of housing there over time. And one of the good things about it is it's high. We need money from, we're hoping to get money from the state for infrastructure to enable us to do the development, but we know we can support expanded population, so we'd love to be able to do that. It's not right downtown, but on the other hand, it's also not right next to the river.
Great. What else is going on around
We are also,
mitigating water?
yeah, we are also working on housing development in Barre, and we're working with Downstreet to build right in downtown Barre, right in the floodplain, but a flood resilient 30 to 40 unit building in downtown Barre. So
In the north end?
No, not in the north.
That's actually in the downtown,
Yeah.
on the corner of Seminary in North Main.
It's a city-owned parking lot.
In
that
addition,
doesn't
we have,
change.
we're doing the Prospect Heights development that is well out of the floodplain, thankfully. But even when you do something out of the floodplain, you realize that you have to give a lot of thought to where the stormwater is going to go. So it's not enough to just be up high. You have to be mindful of your neighbors and, in our case, the rest of our city, and make sure that we treat the stormwater as we should. So that is about a 37-acre parcel that the city has an option on. We applied for and were successful. It's about a $6 million project. It would support about, give or take, 128 units of housing. We were successful in, it's a $6 million project, and we were awarded a $3 million Northern Borders Regional Commission grant. So we feel really good about that. I mean, anytime, with construction costs the way they are, it's horrifying. I mean, that's what I've done for 30 years. I've built buildings and restored buildings. And it is horrifying to me when I look at $350, $400 a square foot construction costs, or even rehabilitation costs. So, you know, there's always that you have, but we feel very good. Anytime you have 50% of a project cost literally in hand, we feel good about our ability to be successful with that project. So hopefully the council will commission $60,000 in a couple of weeks for some pre-engineering work so we can delineate the wetlands. We know there are wetlands there. Delineate the project, nail down, you know, we say up to 128 units. It could be 70. It could be 50, but you know, you have to start somewhere, and in Barre, we're 3 square miles. And like Montpelier, actually probably unlike Montpelier, I think more of your residential dwellings are up out of the floodplain. That's somewhat the case in Barre, not necessarily in Barre City, more in Barre Town. So, you know, we have to, as we look to the future, and as we look to some of these buyouts and reclaiming some of the floodplain, you know, we also have to figure out, as we're working on that, we've got to figure out, well, where do people go in the meanwhile? So if we want to affect a FEMA buyout, we can kiss those people goodbye, and it's a big race to the bottom for Barre City as our population drops by 30%, or we can be thoughtful about how we move forward and say, look, we will do these buyouts, but we're going to make sure that those folks have a place to go.
That's terrific. So when
Yeah,
you look
it's all really easy. I mean, we all know sitting here, it's just like,
Yeah, it makes
falling
sense.
off a log.
And when you think about the north end, where you're going to be doing some of those buyouts, there
Yeah.
has been times where people have heard that there's plans to turn some of that into an area that would absorb water. But what's the thinking there? And I know you're waiting tests. Do you want to
It's
share
okay.
more on that? Or
I know, we can talk about that. No, what I was just going to talk about is that with the help of VHCB, we commissioned the Regional Planning Commission to do an infill study.
Yeah.
So just like really, you know, overturning every rock and stone, finding places, because we are so densely, like Tom said, it's, you know, it's a small area and with a lot of different, it's not just water, but also the topography, but finding those places where maybe we can expand, not just waiting for that big tract of land, but also the small infill areas.
but you can coexist with the, you know, with the water. I mean, you can. We proved that. City Place, which is a state building that currently has some state agencies in it, that building is less than 10 years old. They had some landscaping damage that they had to fix. The building itself was fine. The Downstreet project on Keith Avenue, which was constructed 4 years ago, Tess, 4 or 5?
Yeah.
You know, again, inconvenience, but not flooded. I mean, right here in Montpelier, you know, the transit center.
Yeah.
Okay, inconvenienced, but not damaged.
Yeah, so that hardening of buildings that you're talking about in Montpelier, Mike, seems incredibly important. the building new housing that answers the fact that people are being displaced and that you have a growing city that you want to have vibrancy in, and you need to have that housing, both super important. I'm going to keep pushing people to think about wetlands.
Right.
Keep thinking about
Yeah.
the mitigation side, and because if the trend is true, that we're hearing about increased rainfall, and we're hearing from someone who's seen 10, 11 inches of rain in their community already, the next flood, I think personally what's happened in Vermont has been success in dealing with floods. After 27, the dams that were put together, people complained, people were nervous, but actually those dams prevented a lot of flooding. They did their job. They're doing their job all the time. The problem is that when we ramp up beyond the capacity of those dams to actually mitigate the rainfall, we're going to see increased flooding. And we've seen the cycle of that, right? The last 3-4 years. So the question, still is going to come back to why we have to do the nuts and bolts first, and why we need to protect people and property first, and we need to think about human needs first with housing and other work. How do we also think about what we can be doing to keep that trajectory from overwhelming all our best efforts over time? So other thoughts about
Well, thank you so much.
within your community?
I also want to, so in wetlands, I also want to think about, so our main tax base is farming. And we are really thinking through now fires, like all of the, droughts are coming soon. And how do we create a resilient town? How do we attract young people and create, more of a business, if you will, sort of downtown kind of attractive place? I understand Gen Z wants to walk everywhere. They don't want to get in their cars. So how do you do that? Well, we need wastewater help. I keep raising our hand and saying, come on, I know there are earmarks out there. Like, how do you get your hand up and get some wastewater so you have a village, like a walkable village? We just spent $5 million upgrading to LEED certified our town garage. We could have actually worked with the town of Plainfield and shared resources, like not to get into the weeds on these things, but like if we think together about how we're allocating resources and then what we want to see in the future, meaning attracting young people, how to deal with our aging population, how to help our farmers get ready for the droughts. And I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. I think there's a lot of mapping of shared resources. I feel like we need to sort of think about what do we want to attract, as well as how are we going to deal with the impacts of these floods and the disasters.
Other communities that have resiliency stories that, recognizing that resilience may mean being careful about the future of our forests in the increased fire setting, which we've seen in Canada. It may mean building housing to ensure that everyone has a safe, solid place to live that's out of the floodplain. Are there other projects that are going forward in some of the other towns that haven't come up yet? Yeah.
We had, select board chair and myself organized this town forum in the summer, and just in our very local area, there's a guy named Rudy Rudell, who's a river scientist on the White River Partnership, who is so smart and has interacted with people in our community, so has credibility. A guy named Marcus Bradley, who works for Red Start, who manages most of the private land in our town. So we brought both of them there as, here's some really smart people that think about this. And then I think there can also be a challenge of bringing in someone from outside who doesn't belong, and then they're telling people who've lived there for generations that this is how you fix what you're doing. And what was really nice is like 25 minutes in, there was a resident from our town who brought up dredging, which doesn't rise to the surface a lot in terms of in those sorts of conversations, but you hear it all the time if you're at the gas station or the town garage. And if you've never met Marcus Bradley before, he was just like, Dwayne, I've managed your woods for 20 years, right? Got brook trout coming in there that weren't there before, important for your grandkids. I'm not gonna come to your woods and drop wood in the streams because it's a dumb idea or because I'm not sure it's gonna work. And we're able to have I don't think they agreed leaving there, but Dwayne was able to listen to Marcus, and Marcus was able to not shut down Dwayne or Dwayne's grandfather, who's dredged those streams 2 generations ago, but was saying, look, speeding up the water, that seems to be part of the problem. Deeper channels, that's part of the problem. And I get why it's really intuitive. You had a 5-foot deep channel before July 2023. You got all this sediment and brush. You see a 3-foot deep channel. Seems an obvious solution. Let's get that back to 5 so the water can go through there and it doesn't spill over. So it's meeting people with the models of understanding that they have.
Yeah, the model is really let it spill over now.
Yeah.
How do you let it spill over? How do you?
Otherwise Montpelier gets all the water that's channeled so well from Washington.
Right, and in this conversation, the underlying logic is who cares how fast it is or how much pent-up force? If we can get it through the village, we're good.
Right.
But then there's the town Barre, or there's the town of Montpelier. But Marcus Bradley has the cachet to be able to address that in the way that
Yeah. You don't want to set a pipe that speeds and shoots from where you are to downtown Barre, to downtown Montpelier, to downtown Waterbury, going faster at each stage and doing more damage.
You gotta fill your streams with sponges.
Well, that's right. So what do you do? How do you do that? And I guess, like we've been talking about, what have you done? What work is your community in terms of increasing adaptation and reducing future impacts? But, when you think about all this, you're dealing with human priorities, obviously. This housing and homelessness and education and budgets and all the complexities of what you municipal leaders have to deal with every day. It's intense. And whatever you are doing, you're going to get criticized for. So it's intense. But when you think about the resiliency side, it's like that's sort of an easy one to set back because nobody's calling for it in an immediate way. And yet long-term for the future of your community is probably as important as any of them. So are there things that you wish you could do or that you'd like to foresee working towards? And what do you need? What are the needs? One of the things that would be interesting to come out of this conversation at the end, maybe partly in our full group discussion is, are there things that could be added up where, we've heard about a couple of, FEMA grants and grants for the northern borders, but are there ways of packaging some of the work for the watershed that could be beneficial to everyone in the watershed? Sir?
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that I've just been thinking about is like the challenges of the way in which our municipalities are structured on this watershed issue, right? And that going back to your question about people thinking of like wanting to get the water through the village as quickly as possible and maybe not particularly invested in what happens downstream, I wonder the degree to which there need to be developed like economic models of financing to help with land conservation across the watershed so that towns like Montpelier doesn't have that many floodplains, right? But like we're invested in floodplains across the watershed. Right? And so it just strikes me that there aren't systems right now for municipalities to be thinking together around the economics of this work. And I think it'd be really interesting to see if that kind of modeling could happen.
Okay.
Community trust that can buy we have a beautiful floodplain right now available for sale. It would be so smart for our town to buy it and to make sure that it is a sponge. Where do we get that money? How do we do that? How do we raise our hand?
So one would be like Clean Water Act 319 funding.
Okay, thank you.
I would think, right, I think you maybe have a better idea of that. Okay. But like there's funding available that's like focused on non-point source pollution.
Okay.
So that, I don't really know how that works with purchasing properties, but I know like the Basin Program also has funding that is working towards that type of idea. So that's maybe what you're getting at, like different opportunities where you're not really focusing on resiliency, but there's funding mechanisms for like fulfilling the Clean Water Act that would function as well, like,
So 319, if I
Yeah.
go, yeah, okay, we're on that.
Yes, please, from East Montpelier.
From East Montpelier, but this question is more from the public's point of view in general. Regarding Montpelier, they decided, as I get it from what you're saying, making the businesses downtown resilient building by building. And does that mean you've given up on the idea of making the town as a whole resilient and let the businesses exist? In other words, the idea of a levy that protects the whole town rather than each building protecting itself is a decision you've made based on what?
Yeah, there really isn't any levy or built solution that's going to work. Because we're just a city of bridges. I mean, you couldn't put a levee. I mean, you'd have to dig a big underground ditch and it would fill up with water as fast as you had it there. So really the best approach, and the example we use, city center, City Place and Barre, the transit center, all places that were built after 1985. 1985 is when the city of Montpelier adopted flood regulations that said you had to put in any new buildings at base flood or higher. None of them flooded. So the problem in Montpelier is 95% of the buildings were built before 1985. That's our problem. So we've got a lot of buildings, and the M&T Bank building on State Street that has floodgates that you can put in. So there are functional things that we could do to just keep our historic downtown. It's the largest historic district. It is one of the most intact and complete historic districts, and the fact that it's the capital is just, that much, makes it that much more spectacular, that we've got this many historic buildings. Really, the answer is to go in and work and see how can we flood-proof these buildings, and it's going to be expensive, it's going to be time-consuming, but
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right about the bridges. Have they considered just doing like a drawbridge or something and just raising the bridges when there's a flood?
So just to answer your question, Chris, one of the things that the city did as the follow-up to the floods that we described was create this commission. So one, I don't want to speak for them, there's representatives of the commission here, but they broke up into a series of work groups, and one of them is Resilient Downtown. So they are actually evaluating all the different options.
Right.
So, to say we've ruled out, making downtown resilient, I think that they are finding,
put a giant flood wall along, then we're just speeding water to another place. So I think the realities are very challenging.
Sure.
What would that look like? And so the question is, as we work in concert with our neighbors to figure out floodplains and also how do we also prepare for the next flood and make sure buildings, can recover and do those things. And, raising all those historic buildings is going to be a monstrous undertaking. And, not every building owner, they're all privately owned. So people are going to make their own decisions about what they want to do and what risk they're willing to take. So it is a particularly challenging, just as an aside, after the 92 ice jam flood, the city, before my time, but just barely, the city commissioned the Army Corps to look at options. And, one of them was like, move the river under the hill that National Life is on, just reroute it and build it and have it come out the other side.
They did that in Barre, it didn't work out.
Yeah, exactly, but it's like, can you imagine what that would take to do that, right? And I, so I think if there's not that kind of completely crazy solution, then I think you end up dealing with the facts on the ground and trying to figure out a way to work with the communities. And to some extent, we're trying to be as collaborative as we can with the state, but when we talk about financing these things in a watershed, the state in some ways is the most equitable way to do it, because it's not dumping it on any one local tax-paying group or that kind of thing. I think having, right, Stephanie? We're just fund it for everybody. But, I think that is a player that needs to be, if we form a working group, they've got to be there. And I think that's where, because it's real easy, right? It's real easy to say, get it out of our town, then let Barre Town figure out what they're going to do, and let Montpelier, and by the time it gets to Waterbury and Richmond and Winooski, it's a jet stream, right? And so, we've all got to figure out how, but we also don't want our own people to flood and be damaged. That's what we're charged with protecting, so.
And while you're doing that, we talk about $100,000 or $250,000. This is millions of dollars.
Multiple, hundreds of millions.
It is daunting. I mean, in the city of Barre, being the granite capital of the world is both a blessing and a curse. We have a lot of waste granite. We have mountains of it. And over the past 100 years, granite folks who worked in the granite quarries in the city themselves hauled some of that waste granite and made it into blocks, and we literally lined the river. And as the city grew and we wanted to reclaim more land, it was easy. Where the riverbank used to go like this, we made it go like this, and we built right up to it. And and I told people, look, while I'm here, I'll do my share. I've had enough, I'll do my share. But don't expect me to fix it, because I can't. This is a problem that was 100 years in the making between climate change and the way we developed. I mean, and why did we develop along the river? Because our poo had to go somewhere. So, all right, that's what we did. This is a problem that was 100 years in the making between climate change and the way we developed our cities and towns. And it's going to take 100 years to fix it. I mean,
Meanwhile,
we have to be realistic.
Meanwhile, as municipalities, you
do the best you can, and you invest.
And you're seeding studies and work that could lead to major investments that have transformational impact. And the fact that it takes a long time doesn't mean we get to walk away from it. And I don't hear you saying that. So,
No, I don't.
So I guess we're still in it's the timeline and the challenges of all the different competing needs, including the immediate human needs that are incredibly daunting some days, that make it difficult to think about the actual kind of wetlands restoration that would work systemically, and how big that system is in terms of the watershed, and how much of it is beyond the normal operating procedures and sense of personal responsibility of an employee of a city. It's bigger and it's longer. And so those are fundamental challenges, but I don't know how we walk away from them.
Right.
We can't.
I wish Berlin was here, because, I mean, that's another big piece of it that needs to think about making a plane,
If there's a map, yeah, that's right.
Sure.
Just because one of the things that I find difficult is it's not just the water, but it's also there's different species. There's a big change going on, and how that impacts the water. If you have the emerald ash borer and they're knocking down trees, or you have more fire, and then you have ash going into your rivers as a result of wildfires. And there's a whole slew of possibilities that's going to be more than just flooding.
Right.
And there's a bigger picture. Now, maybe this can change in 10 years again. Like, it feels like things are changing in cycles. I don't know for sure. I'm pretty much a novice at this, but it feels like, we're going to have this point, and then all of a sudden realize, this ash just came rushing down and filled up our rivers, or we're going to have,
Yeah. Who would have thought a boreal forest in Canada the size of Ohio would burn? We don't think of forest fires here, but back 100 years ago, there were forest fires in Vermont.
And in East Montpelier, we're actually adding into our master plan for the first time fires as a natural hazard. It hasn't been in the master plan, but now we're addressing that, and air quality as a result.
Julie showed the trajectory of rainfall increase, which was 7 inches a year?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, that rain is coming in deluges in between droughts. It's not steady on. It's partly the problem that the weather's become hysterical with climate change. The heated ocean, the fact that Lake Champlain's 7 degrees warmer, it leads to greater variability, greater intensity of weather. So, I guess I'm still pushing, because our fundamental tripping point in the climate change challenge for this region of Vermont has been water. Still thinking, are there points of vision that we need to be thinking about as we look at the future of the watershed? Are there ways that Barre and Montpelier and downstream connects with the uplands and the heights of land and the villages above to frame a larger platform of work that doesn't become a plan on a shelf somewhere, that sits you know, in the RPC alone, but that becomes a campaign document that actually drives, you know, politics follow local leadership. Politics follow local people. And local people lining up with a strategic plan drive the conversation. And driving the conversation makes it visible and people respond. The squeaky wheel locally gets the grease. That's why you guys are successful with the projects you're successful with, is that you become a squeaky wheel. But if you added that up, you know, is there a way to advance a collective model? And I'm just saying, I don't know.
I guess I would say for the two urban areas, we don't have a lot of wetlands. There's not going to be a lot of opportunities for us in those. But stormwater management and the stormwater utility that Bill was mentioning, those are effectively accomplishing that same thing. Now, obviously, if Montpelier is under 2.5 feet of water, all that low impact development, LID, stormwater management isn't doing any good because it's underwater. But for those opportunities where it's not, where we've got that 10-year flood event, that's where the LID, low impact development, stormwater management will make a difference for Waterbury, is if we're holding that water and not draining it quickly to those storm drains and sending it by pipe to the river. If we're collecting it and absorbing as much as we can in those smaller developments, that's where we can help the downstream communities. Obviously, once it reaches a certain level, all bets are off. The stormwater management just becomes.
And Mike, is that work in progress?
It is work in progress. It was part of the 2016 stormwater management plan that came out and that said this is what we should be doing. A lot of Chittenden County towns have, they're required to. We aren't. I'm trying to remember what the acronym is.
MS4.
MS4, there we go. We are not an MS4 community, but a lot of other places are required to do it. That's why Williston, South Burlington, they've got required. We aren't, but we're trying to basically do the same thing. And communities can start to basically you start a new utility. You've got a water bill, you got a sewer bill, and you got a stormwater bill. The stormwater bill goes into a fund. We use the funds to manage the stormwater infrastructure. We have rules and requirements that you have to meet new standards. We have to have the zoning match to help implement the goals, but we haven't gotten there yet for Montpelier. It's been something since 2016 we said we've got to do this, and it hasn't quite gotten there.
Yeah.
But it's been the plan for a long time. But that would be we can't do the wetlands. We can do our part with stormwater management, and that, as you said, will still take.
And yet you are doing a wetlands project with the farm project. Someone want to describe that for everyone?
I'll describe it.
Ben Doyle is the chair of the Montpelier Recovery.
I'm Ben Doyle with the commission, but I also work for the Preservation Trust of Vermont, and it's one of those things that overlaps. So the 5-home farmway is an 18-acre parcel down by Agway. It's a floodplain with a historic home, Jacob Davis property on it. It was owned by a nonprofit that went out of business over 10 years ago. It's been stuck in a legal morass. There's various easements, conservation things. It's a pretty challenging property, but with the cooperation of the city and the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, PTV, the Vermont Community Loan Fund, adjoining landowners, and most importantly, the Flood Resilient Communities Program, we're able to get a grant to remove the home, which is unfortunate, but we're going to document it and do the best we can to mitigate that impact. And then Roy's group is doing an analysis of different options for floodplain restoration on the site that I don't think we have the modeling yet of what the actual impact will be, but we're hopeful. And I think what's interesting about that project is it's 18 acres sounds like a lot, but it's not really, And right. But the truth is, there's other properties adjoining that along, whether it's the mobile home park in Berlin or the AOT garage on 302, that there are these opportunities. And if we could aggregate them in a way, then I think you really start to see some meaningful impact.
When you are thinking about doing those, are you thinking about actually lowering the land so it absorbs more water? Or are you thinking of it?
Wait, you want to talk about what the plan is?
Yeah, just creating floodplains for storage.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Okay. Expanded storage upstream from the downtown.
Which would be helpful.
Yeah.
What would really be helpful? It occurred to me as we started looking at mitigation projects and the projects that would be most impactful in Barre, it became clear very quickly that there isn't a lot of hydrology studies. There's not a lot of modeling that exists. And so early on, we asked the question, we said, well, if we're going to spend this money to study, and keep in mind, we're small, we're 3 square miles. So if we're going to spend the money in Barre to have the modeling that will show us how water moves through the city, what 6 inches of rain in 2 hours looks like versus 6 inches of rain in 24 hours, we'll be able to predict the effect on the city very quickly. And I think Teddy was the one who asked the question and said, well, are there other communities who might want to share in some of this? In other words, if we're doing this study in Barre, and obviously it affects Montpelier, and we were quickly told, well, it doesn't quite work that way. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, they can tell you how electricity moves through the grid in New England. They can tell you how traffic moves through every highway and how it affects my city. We don't have statewide modeling that will tell us how the water flows through every city and town in Vermont. And we should.
I hear you.
Because if we had that data, then we could look at projects like that and say, okay, now we have the modeling done. Where are the most impactful projects? In other words, and we've learned this quickly in Barre, projects that everyone would point at, the trestle. And everyone would say, it's the trestle, it's that damn trestle, it's torturing the city. Well, not really so much. There's other projects. As we listened to the scientists and looked at some of the modeling, we figured out that there were projects that were less expensive that would be more impactful. So I think maybe we should talk to Secretary Moore. Well, if the state wanted to take the lead and say, we're going to do the modeling and we're going to make that available to flood-prone cities and towns.
Yeah, so I guess one observation would be that it would be interesting if Waterbury was in the room with us, because they looked at what happened to their downtown, and they directly looked at the landscape, particularly around the state buildings, and there was lowering of the land, so that you built up something of a bathtub out there that absorbed a lot of water that otherwise might have flowed quickly in through the downtown. So like there's, I think you're absolutely right. You need that science, and it should be science-driven. And I shouldn't be answering as though I'm an expert at this, because I'm not. I'm just a neutral facilitator. But the challenge with some of the studies is, the public is feeling tremendous urgency. The businesses in downtown Montpelier are feeling tremendous urgency. And a lot of them won't survive another flood. And a lot of residents that get hit again are out of town. They're going. They can't handle it. And so the urgency of the moment is to be proactive in doing what's within our power. At the same time, we're looking at the big picture from a scientific point of view. It seems to me we're doing both, and we're showing that kind of holistic leadership that builds a sense of unity and progress.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And as usual, I agree with Mayor Lozon that this is going to take longer than people think.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot more money than people think. And no one wants to hear that.
Yeah.
Because we all want instant action. But, it's great because it will take an understanding of the full watershed, and it's going to take a commitment to actually make those changes. And it's going to take the Washingtons and Plainfields and everyone else to say, yeah, East Montpelier, we're going to do this so that Barre and Montpelier don't flood. And why should we do that, right? Like, it's a very difficult conversation. And I just want to say that I think we can't overlook the importance of the funding in all of this. Just sitting here, we're in the midst of doing our city budget. We've got a 23% health, insurance increase. We're facing an extremely dire budget. We have homelessness issues. We have school taxes that are out of control. We've got, all these things. So, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but is the state government going to appropriate hundreds of millions of dollars toward flood mitigation when they're trying to balance everything out without raising revenues? I appreciate that Barry's going to be able to put hundreds of thousands of dollars into flood mitigation. We're not. I could tell you right now, as much as we want to, we will have some money in our capital plan, but we're scraping, and, again, small p political, but I don't think after January 20, there's going to be a huge amount of federal investment in this, at least for 2 years. So where's the money coming from? And I think we have to be realistic about that. What is the possible? What can be done? What are, can we put together an 18-acre reclamation? And I don't know, again, we should continue shooting for the stars, but we also have to tell the honest truth to people, because if people, if we just keep saying, we're going to fix it all, and then it's going to be, why didn't you? And those are the facts. It's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars that no one has.
I guess I'm getting depressed.
Sorry, but it's...
It's not all gloom and
Well,
doom.
here's actually a positive. So the insurance companies get it, right? They are on the front lines. They've seen, they're folding. I mean, Sanibel, like all of these insurance companies that have been hit time after time. We need them in the room. They understand it's the social cohesion, the grassroots organizers that get the towns back online, get these, companies and the businesses going faster than anybody. It's all of us in the room here right now, the unpaid workers, right, that are going to go and make sure the neighbors are cared for and back, and then, Joe is in the deli making sandwiches again. Like that makes a town function, and some of these insurance companies get it. That should result in real dollars. Like there is actually in the Lightsmith group, there are a number of groups that are like actually calculating that now, and I want them in the room. They need to be here. And like it or not, we're actually really blessed compared to other parts of the country, right? Like, I mean, we have water. I know it's not really has been that friendly, but I think the droughts and the fires, personally, that's really scary stuff. When we can't feed our families and we have migrants coming, it's going to get a lot worse. So let's think about, how do we work with what we've got now? How do we incentivize farmers to make their land spongy? Like, how do we get biochar? There are natural solutions we can put on the land now to help our farmers, to help our communities, to provide a really resilient, forward-thinking, sharing, caring community. Like, it's possible.
So I don't really need to be, I generally tend to be a really positive person. People who've worked with me know that. And maybe I've just been doing this for too long.
Yeah, until budget time.
But I just appreciate that, because the flip side of that is insurance companies will just cancel your policies. Right? That's how they deal with it. We, like most of us, are insured through the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and that's great. They were only able to get $5 million in aggregate coverage for the entire state after Irene. So in '23, when we all got flooded, us and Barre and everybody else, they had to prorate everyone's losses, and we all got pennies on the dollar, because that was all that was available. They couldn't get more flood insurance because the national pool said, Vermont, you're too much of a risk after Irene. So I hope, I would love, in terms of fire, we went, a number of years ago, we went to insurance companies about like sprinklering in downtown buildings, like fire prevention. We said, hey, if you just put up a little bit of money, we could make all these buildings basically fireproof, and then you'd never have to pay a fire loss. And the answer was, we just gamble it's not our building. It's someone else's building that burns, and we're not paying the loss at all, so we didn't have to pay anything. That's how they play the game. So I would love to think that insurance companies would participate in prevention, and maybe they will. Maybe they're thinking differently, but I don't know.
We've got like 2 minutes left.
Sorry.
Any idea about resilient strategies, reducing wetlands runoff that hasn't hit the table yet, that we could say in 2 or 3 sentences? Anyone got an idea?
Needs to be a county effort.
County.
Needs to be a county effort. We should have a county form of government anyway, but it needs to be a county effort, because there are some towns, whether it's resources, monetary people, there are some smaller towns that are at a disadvantage. It doesn't mean they don't want to do it. They want to work with everyone, but they don't have that economy of scale. And if we had some sort of county-wide model, similar to what you were saying, sir, if we had some sort of county model, it would make it easier for everyone. And ultimately, it would benefit everyone.
It seems like the funding for upstream sponges, just the whole ecosystem and water management, a lot more money could go into that. Just keep it from flowing down quickly. That seems like an avenue that hasn't been, I haven't heard, has been explored or put in the news.
I think scientists, when they look at watershed, that's all they talk about. But they don't talk about how you make the money happen.
Well, I don't hear them talking in detail about how we're going to keep the water in the upper part of the watershed or slow it down. I mean, I sort of get that idea, but I don't think it's gotten through to the public that this is really a great possibility. If it is, I don't know. Yeah, it could be. And have they done the studies to know each raindrop accelerated in the aggregate? If you did something to the upper part of the watershed, would that significantly impact the amount of rain getting into the valley?
Yeah, I think
they have, but I don't see us as the public hearing about that.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just not that popular a story.
Well, I think it's a number of people have said it costs so much money, it's almost inconceivable to implement. But that ramp of the rainfall says something needs to happen. So I'm sure we're all here because we believe that. And I look forward to the last stage of the conversation. So thanks so much. It's been fascinating to hear from you. Appreciate you being here.